Good day, esteemed audience. You are on Mark Solonin's YouTube channel. We have an interview today, which we haven't had in a long time. And we've definitely never had one like this up until now. We've always talked to people who generate ideas. And finally, we have as our guest someone who, without a doubt, generates ideas, but also creates real objects that you can actually hold in your hands and which can be very useful. And let me say right away, I didn't invite him here for nothing, and I'm not just addressing you for no reason. Of course, you will get involved, you will join in this work, and we'll be making these objects together with our guest. His name is Evgeny. He is widely known as Major Chernobayev. Evgeny, good afternoon. Thank you for coming to see us.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation.
Without further ado, let's get straight to the point. What's actually going on? Are you in your spaceship or what's happening? Where are you?
I'm somewhere in subspace, in the metaverse.
In the metaverse. And why is it that instead of sitting like a normal person in an office on a couch, you're in the metaverse?
Well, tough times call for appropriate countermeasures, so to speak.
I see. Then please explain right away to the esteemed audience what you do and why you have to be in a virtual refuge.
Well, most of those who will be watching who are generally familiar with me know me as someone who worked with phone calls. For many years, I pestered, so to speak, the Russian Federation and actors of the Russian Federation through my phone and got 2 criminal cases there because of it. But since the full-scale invasion, I had to switch gears and use my skills, my experience, my professional abilities to take real action, not just engage in counter-propaganda or, some kind of entertainment. What do I mean by that? What kind of real actions? Given a full-scale invasion by an enemy superior in strength and scale, no European country would have been prepared for this. Many people say that, Ukraine, wasn't prepared or something like that. But I guarantee you that Germany, Britain, or anyone else, if they found themselves in the same situation, wouldn't have enough resources in their warehouses to cover any of the areas fundamentally connected to the process of defending the country. From training new army recruits to the actual process of fighting. Plus, no one knew or expected that FPV drones would become weapons. In other words, there simply wasn't an industry for converting frames with motors into weapons. And that's where 3D printing comes onto the scene. The very first time I ever got my hands on a 3D printer was back when COVID hit. That was when they became fairly accessible. And one of my acquaintances said, hey, let's go print something for the medical workers. We were printing these face shields so they could protect themselves from COVID patients coughing on them. Of course, it wasn't as widespread as it is now with Front of the Army. But the very fact that you can use a 3D printer for quickly producing things that are needed to solve problems faced by society, that's when it became clear that this technology could be used that way. A few years go by, the full-scale invasion begins, and that same friend invites me to print something for the armed forces. What was it? I'll show you a real-life example just to make it as clear as possible. This is what's called an RKGA handheld shaped charge grenade. Here in the cross-section, you can see how everything is arranged inside. This is a Soviet legacy, and we have a lot of this kind of Soviet legacy in our warehouses. If this thing hits a tank, it will penetrate its armor with a shaped charge jet. But chasing after a tank and throwing grenades at it is quite a risky business. But we have drones, so what do? We remove the handle from this RKG and 3D print a tail section, which contains an internal inertial activation mechanism. We screw it onto the RKG. We attach it to a drone and send it toward the tank. Thus, using the Soviet legacy, we are destroying a multi-million-dollar machine. This tail section costs, about 5,200 hryvnias. Basically, this was the concept at the initial stage that I encountered when, let's say, I was first invited to do some printing. But in any matter, you need a systematic and structured approach. Actually, and professionally, so to speak, I work in business process optimization. I manage teams of developers and explain to them what needs to be done to make the client satisfied. In this case, the client is Ukrainian society, which Putin is trying to destroy. And in fact, The process known as Army Friend was specifically created in order to maximize the efficiency of people who truly understand that we need to take action and that the state system simply cannot cope with this challenge on its own.
Evgeny, to clarify for everyone, Druk is not friend of the army, friends, but Druk. Druk is a seal that came from the German language, but in the Ukrainian language, seal is precisely Druk army. In other words, it's an army of printers. That's one way to look at it.
Exactly. The Germans understand it, and for Americans, we translate it as print army. Right. Here's a second example. We receive Bulgarian ATM mines for grenade launches. For drone operators, this metal tail isn't needed. It's heavy, it adds weight. So they say, how about this? We will send you a detailed photo along with the precise measurements of this particular thread, and then you can make us a plastic tail for it instead of the usual metal one. What do you think about that? And the same goes for the initiation system. Make us a little striker so we can hang it on a drone, drop it, and hit enemy personnel. All these little plastic things, you might think, what's the big deal? Just some trifle. What even are they? Is this even the military-industrial complex or what? But in the skilled hands of sappers, plastic parts printed somewhere in a kitchen in Poltava or Ternopil take on a completely different, so to speak, significance. That's right. And in this way, a bunch of these little things end up influencing the situation at the front. Moreover, it turns out that the manufacturing process itself is lengthy. 3D printing is not a fast process. But since our system provides people with ready-made models, technical specifications, instructions on how to check the quality of what they're making, instructions on how to print it and where to send it, any without any technical background at all can buy a printer for $200 and become part of a distributed network of the people's military-industrial complex. In a nutshell, that's what Friend of the Army is.
So let me ask right away about the entry barrier. I want to become a participant in your distributed network for making plastic widgets with threads. What do I need to have? Money, a workspace, technical knowledge, a computer, 25 computer cores, a supercomputer, and so on. What do I need?
You don't need a supercomputer. Well, it's preferable to at least have integrated graphics in the process, because the process of converting a 3D model, the so-called G-code that is, the layer-by-layer code that's sent to the printer doors require a certain amount of computing power. So you do need a computer. Yes, you can do it from a phone, but it's not very efficient. It's better to have some kind of computer. And in terms of space, the printer doesn't take up much, about 30 by 30 centimeters, maybe 40 by 40. So you can put it anywhere, even on the balcony. No problem.
So 3D Vasya, I've never held one in my hands. A 3D printer is basically like a regular photocopier in terms of size, nothing more than that.
Yeah. Basically, it's like a multifunction printer, like a copier, you could say, about that size.
Like a copier.
In terms of energy consumption, well, only at startup, when it heats up the bed in the nozzle, it can use up to 1 kilowatt. But during operation, over many hours, it consumes about 130 watts per hour. So it's not a big load. And basically your electricity bill won't noticeably increase.
So it's like your microwave oven, or better yet, your washing machine, for example, in your home, which can draw a lot of power when heating water, but then it just hums quietly and consumes its 100 watts gently. Right. Got it. So what do I need to know how to do? Will I be able to figure out how to make this thing, and even with threading?
Actually, it's all quite simple. Our entry threshold is much lower because our platform has what's called a school, with a series of educational articles that clearly and simply explain what needs to be done. Plus, each assignment comes with a quality check video that lets you see what you ended up with and what the results should look like. In addition, we have a quality control system with curators, meaning that each product is assigned to a specific person who is very knowledgeable about it. He had seen it thousands of times already. And when you print something, you simply send a photo and video of the product. When you print just one item at first before you start printing a large batch, you send that single item. The curator reviews it and says, everything looks good, go ahead and start printing the batch. Or they might say, hold on, you have this and that issue here, fix these things, and then everything will turn out fine. As for the price of the printer, the cheapest printer costs $200. The optimal, or I would even say the ideal, printer costs €750. But in reality, the cost of the printer is just your entry ticket. Because, well, The idea is that we load up the printer so it works 23 and a half hours a day, 7 days a week, in other words, constantly without stopping. Launched for printing. So how does the printing process work? Basically, you can place models all over the table. There's a table called a print bidand. We fill the entire surface of this table with identical models and it prints them. And the printing time for this can take it can print for a whole day, basically. So you don't need to go near it for a whole day. If everything is set up correctly, or if you have a good printer that calibrates itself, you just press the print button and go about your business. The printer does its job and you don't need to check on it or watch over it or anything like that. It's a completely autonomous process, so to speak, that doesn't require any intervention.
Wait a second. How long will it take before the finished product appears, which still has to be removed by hand?
It depends on the item's complexity. That is,
The one you showed us, the tailpiece.
this tailpiece here consists of two parts, and together it takes 6 hours to print.
Aha, so after 6 hours, I need to come to the printer. It probably turns off by itself. Of course, it turns off by itself.
Yes, it stops and waits. You remove what's been printed, put the magnetic base which it prints on back in place, and press the print button again. That's why you set up a lot of these tails, so you have to come to it less often. With a small printer, you'll have to come more often. With the large one, I'm talking about Bambu Lab printers. These are Chinese printers, but they're basically optimal of what's currently on the market. They're quite smart. They calibrate themselves. That's actually why the entry threshold is so low. You don't need to have a technical background. The printer will tell you everything itself. It'll write on the screen, lubricate the shafts that the bed moves on.
It's embarrassing to talk about this during wartime, and yet, what about the environmental impact in the apartment? This thing smells, you need to ventilate. Ideally, it should be a separate room, not where people sleep. How is it from an environmental perspective in general?
Ideally,
On safety?
of course, it should be a room where you don't sleep. It could be your home office. It could be a balcony. It could be the kitchen. Regarding the smells, we mainly use two types of plastic, PLA and PETG. PLA is considered environmentally friendly because it is made from cornstarch. But in any case, it's still plastic. And there are people who have a personal intolerance to the smell, like, well, I just don't like it. That's it. But by and large, there's nothing really. I mean, there are toxic plastics like ABS, which actually emits toxic fumes during use. But most parts are printed from PETG. In principle, it's not toxic. So ideally, of course, the room should be well ventilated.
Well-ventilated room. And as for the temperature, does it perhaps need about room temperature? Can it go below zero?
There are solutions for that. If it's a printer that's a more advanced model, they're usually enclosed, so it maintains the necessary climate inside itself. If the printer is open, but it's, for example, on a balcony with drafts, and you can use covers like the ones people use for growing plants at home, for example. You can put it in such a cover, and then it will have its own microclimate inside. It will heat up just fine, and even outside drafts won't affect the printing process or interfere in any way. It will just need to heat up a bit more if it's cooler around. Usually, if the balcony isn't well insulated, it will simply have to use a bit more energy to heat up. But this won't negatively affect the printing process.
Well, in any case, we're still quite far from the cold season, unless our viewers are living in Chile right now. Unless they're in Chile. Okay, got it. What is all this made from? The printer is just a tool, but all this, the raw material for production, what does it actually look like? What is this exactly? Is it powder, granules? What is it?
Yes, we're talking about the most common type of printing is FDM printing. FDM turns a filament with a diameter of 1.75 into it, melts it in the nozzle, and turns it essentially into products like these. Regarding the size of the items, I just want to show one of the products we make for training those who this is an anti-drone gun, an exact replica of an anti-drone gun. Obviously, at the training center, no one's going to give out a real gun because all the real guns are at the front. And what we're talking about here is developing muscle memory. So basically, they run around with this shouting, pew, 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 pew. That's it. This thing weighs, I think, about 2 kilograms or 1.5 kilograms. It takes quite a long time to print.
Is it like a wooden hobby horse or what?
Sort of, yeah, like a wooden Kalashnikov, only with the caveat that we're in the year 2025.
I meant wooden hobby horses. Uh-huh. All right, I see. I see. Where can good people get all this wonderful thread, wire, and so on?
If we're talking about Ukraine, we've arranged with local manufacturers of these materials to provide a good discount for those who are printing for the armed forces. They are integrated directly on the website. A person just goes to the page, clicks order, and everything gets delivered to them. If we're talking about Europe, since there are quite a lot of printers there as well, they somehow find materials locally. Mostly, of course, the cheapest plastic there is Chinese, obviously. That's how it is. On average, it's about 10 euros per kilogram. Here, we're able to buy it for 7 euros per kilogram.
And the tailpiece I liked, it's nice. How much does it weigh? About probably less than half a kilo.
Less. This particular one weighs most likely about 120 grams, I think.
It looks pretty light.
92 grams.
Uh-huh.
So basically, we take a kilogram, make 10 of these tailpieces. And by the law of probability, we've destroyed the tank.
70 cents. Well, I see. That's very good. Someone listened to us and realized that they finally, at last, want to move from sitting on the couch to actually doing something truly real. Where will he put them then?
It is simple.
He did something to himself. The whole balcony is piled up with tailpieces. And then what?
He doesn't have to wait until his whole balcony is piled up with tailpieces. As soon as he has the required amount, that amount is specified in the assignment itself, how many batches need to be printed, he puts them in a box. And when they reach the necessary quantity, he packs up the box, checks the assignment, and there's an address written there where he needs to send it. And he can deliver it himself if it's in his city. We have a filter by locality, so if it's nearby, he can just get in his car, take it over, and hand it off. Or he can send it by any available means, like a courier service or something else. There's no problem with that. If we're talking about delivery from Europe, we have a network of hubs across Europe that already have logistics set up to Ukraine. So, for example, a printer from France sends their printed items to a French address. Their local coordinator conducts a quality check. And if it's not defective, if it's suitable for use, he packs everything up. And for example, once a month, a van goes out, because there's been a well-established network across Europe for a long time of people who regularly transport things to Ukraine. So these items arrive here in such a van and are then distributed to those who order them.
That's very good, if I understood you correctly. So the person outside Ukraine isn't involved in any cross-border transportation. He just sends it from his place in Poland, Germany, or France, and that's it's done. He forgets about it.
Well, he doesn't completely forget about it. When he sends it, he adds a tracking number, and later he'll also receive a quality assessment of his print and a review for sure.
Aha. In Ukraine, everyone here knows all shipments go through Nova Poshta.
As a rule, either by Ukreposhta or in person.
Given.
Besides the tails, there's another very important aspect that we try to focus on, and that's the production of training models. For example, the MS model, right? Or the DM51. In other words, we make exact copies, replicas of what the military uses in the army, which helps to increase survivability. So the instructors who train people are truly passionate about what they do because they understand the better they prepare someone who has just arrived in the army, the more effective that person will be and the fewer losses there will be. In fact, according to the instructors who have significant experience in this area, among those individuals, they were able to successfully train by using carefully designed mock-ups of anti-personnel mines. There has been a notable 70% decrease in the number of injuries that are caused by anti-personnel mines. Because in addition to being able to simply look at this thing and touch it, whereas before, they practically had to draw it on paper. They also train with systems where you can step on it and it will beep and so on. They create entire training fields, training trenches where they lay out these things and grenades are placed in a special way, just as you might encounter them on the battlefield. And this is how the training is done in essence. Printing such an item costs the printer just $1. But with that $1, he essentially saves the person's leg or even their life because they had the chance to practice with it. That's why the amount of effort required from someone who wants to make a difference on the front line compared to the end result is just enormous. It's so significant that honestly, I don't understand why even now there isn't a 3D printer in every single house.
As for making it beep, That's something others add. Your team only makes the plastic part.
No. Our team moved beyond just the plastic part a long time ago. We've been using more than just 3D printing technology for quite a while now. Yes, most products are printed on 3D printers, but for those items that are needed in tens or hundreds of thousands, we use automated press manufacturing technology as well. That is, we make arrangements with those who help us with mold production at prices below market rates, right? Because there's no commercial aspect to it. So,
Evgeny, when I said your team, I didn't mean just your immediate team, but the organizers of this process the distributed network of people on their balconies with a printer. They make a little plastic part.
that's if a person only has a printer. In our distributed network, there are also people with soldering irons who, of course, naturally, because
Well, a soldering iron takes us back to the 90s, right?
why do you say that? Well, there are all sorts of devices. For example, mortar crews, they need the light for their compass to aim properly. But in the army, there's no compass illumination. Mortar crews don't get compass lights. So you can't fire accurately. A point U, a night aiming point, it's a small device, seemingly insignificant, that you need to attach to some stationary object and then turn it on remotely so you can aim. They don't issue those in the army either. So there's actually a fairly large range of devices that need to be soldered. The soldering isn't complicated. It's not SMD. It's just a power source, some kind of circuit board, and that's it. So there's nothing difficult about it, but you need a lot of these devices. And since, for example, they well, I just want to talk about the three main principles of Druk army. The first is providing the military with everything they need. The military come and say, look, we have a system set up where soldiers can place individual orders. They come and say, there's just nothing like this. It doesn't exist yet. But they needed to solve a specific combat task. They say, please make this for us. And we do it if we can. Yes. So, modelers and engineers get involved, take on the task, develop it, training actually. All this 3D printing was originally created just to make prototypes. They make a test version, send it right away. It gets tested. They give feedback. Changes are made. There are several iterations. And then we have a product in our catalog that solves the problem that was there initially. And it also helps others. So this brings us to the second main principle of army printing, the dissemination of best practices. Because someone might not even know about that same tail. He has this RKG lying around, but he doesn't know how to attach it. He might try to make something out of sheet metal or cardboard. It's inconvenient. It doesn't work well. And then he comes to the army printing catalog and sees optimal solutions that are already being used. And the third, most important point is fighting against those who try to profit off the military. This is actually a painful topic because since the start of the full-scale invasion, a certain number of people with Ukrainian passports, I can't call them Ukrainians, they're just people with Ukrainian passports, they decided that just for printing even a little thing like this, right? They think they have the right to charge the military 600% over the cost of the plastic. For some reason, or for example, they take a few microchips, solder them together and say, this device, which costs 8,000 hryvnias in parts, we'll sell to you for 25. Do you want to leave? You do. But then give us 25,000 hryvnias. And when we find out that such a device exists, we reverse engineer it or produce our own equivalent and make it available to the military either at the cost of the components or we raise funds through donations, buy the components, assemble it, and send it to the military for free. And this applies to all possible areas, whether it's drones, drone detection, or basically every single nuance in every field of military activity that exists and where they need help, we try to get involved there. That's why soldering specialists, so to speak, can also join our process and actively take part in it.
Listen, I'd be cautious about that. Some unknown person soldered something in their kitchen, it'll just come undone. I know myself, whoever solders it, it'll come apart.
Of course, naturally. That's why whatever someone solders, they send it to a curator who's the responsible person and really understands what's what. And only after passing the quality control test, there's no way around that. Of course, only then does it actually get sent to the front.
Nevertheless, am I right in understanding that most of it, since you're called Drukarnia, does that mean you mainly make printed plastic products, or am I just narrowing it down too much?
Mostly, of course, yes. First of all, because of the number of individuals involved in this process, that is to say, in the role called printer or maker, that's the largest, broadest, and most popular role. Yes. And it's as simple as possible in terms of the fact that a person doesn't need to spend a lot of time on it. Because, for example, soldering requires 100% of a person's attention. But with a printer, you just set it up and it works by itself, right? Now, I have two printers running while we're doing this interview. So the process is kind of independent.
Yes. Does it make any noise?
It does. It depends, but you definitely won't be able to sleep in a room where a printer is running. After all, there are servo motors. They are making, yes, a robot printer. That's it. But in the next room, it's perfectly fine. No problem at all. Neighbors definitely won't complain. It's not that loud.
No. And the manual, everything is important, but I'm really wondering how people who are outside Ukraine, and there are quite a few, can send this somewhere. If you have such a distributed network where you hand it over and then it's delivered further, then of course everything becomes much easier. And then a very interesting question arises, but it's kind of a painful one. So someone starts working with you.
Right.
They start working with you. And what if something happens to them? That's what they might think.
It's enough to maintain secrecy. That is, you just don't go around telling everyone that you're a hero printing for the armed forces of Ukraine and that's it. And there won't be any problem. That's exactly where the strength of this decentralization lies. Because when there's no central hub, no Iskander missile is a threat.
So you have some kind of, how should I put it? A network. Well, a communication network, or simply put, an internet portal with some, albeit minimally protected, access.
Well, of course, naturally, yes. There's nothing like us posting lists of those who are printing, in which cities and so on. A person doesn't identify themselves at all. They could be from anywhere. We don't collect that kind of information. Basically, we don't need it.
Yeah, by the way, let's say I decide to become a printer. What do you need from me? Nothing except a password to log in?
Just an email address, that's all.
And that's it. An email address. Where do I send it? You tell me where to send it, and then I send it from wherever is convenient.
Log into.
If I'm really worried, I go to a different branch of Nova Posta, not the one that's near me.
Right.
If it's scary,
you don't even have to send it yourself. You can ask someone else to send it. Or you don't use courier services at all and just print orders from your own city and hand them over in person, for example. Or you leave it somewhere as a drop-off. That's also an option, basically. You can make arrangements.
Let's be realistic. Nothing is truly safe during war, but that's just how it is, as they say.
Here, the key point is that many of those who eventually joined Druk say, for many years, we've been donating to various fundraisers, but we'd like to increase the effectiveness of our actions. And here, when a person essentially becomes a true producer, the overall contribution really becomes as effective as possible. I make this comparison with these mock-ups, which...
No, but in addition to that, a person knows for sure that their money didn't go toward buying a Jeep for some guy who got shot at from all sides, but was turned into a very specific tailpiece, specific situation.
I'm proud of the process we've managed to build precisely because in terms of efficiency, we've squeezed out everything possible. Here, efficiency is pushed to the maximum because usual, not always, but those typical fundraisers where people chip in a few hryvnias, after all, those who collect these donations then go and buy the items on the market. Maybe at a discount, but there's still a margin involved. But here, the person themselves knows they've bought the supplies at the best possible price. They've personally invested their own equipment and essentially their own time. And this added value, I compare the prices you see on Rosetka for models. I put together there are a set of models. So to buy them on Rosetka, whether it's a military unit, a soldier, or even an instructor, they would have to spend 148,000 hryvnias. There are 20 pieces of each different model. But for a printer to produce the same volume of models, it would cost 5,600 hryvnias. Once again, 148,000 versus 5,500 hryvnias. The difference is just enormous.
So your competitors are really jacking up the prices. I'm just thinking to myself.
That's exactly what I'm saying. Of course. So the fact is, I think this is robbery. For us, meaning we are people living under enemy shelling and we need our soldiers to be equipped to the highest standard, to be provided with everything they need to protect us as effectively as possible. And that's exactly why it infuriates me when people who call themselves Ukrainians say, all right, I'll do something. I printed this thing on a printer. Now, please pay me 600% on top. For what? You're the one who needs it, not the soldier who's going to buy this thing from you. And honestly, there were a lot of sellers like that at the beginning. They thought, now we're going to make money. We're all Elon Musks here. But after all these years of our dedicated and persistent work, we've managed to seriously push down prices on the market, making things much more affordable for everyone. And for example, things like loaders for cartridges now exist so that you can
To conveniently load the magazine?
Yes, to conveniently load the magazine so that, for example, in winter, you don't hurt your fingers, right? At the beginning, things like this were being sold on sites like OLX for almost 1,000 hryvnias. That was the first version. Then there was the version like this, a bit more convenient. Now it's gotten to the point where we found a manufacturer who makes these things with thermoplastic, and it costs 50 hryvnias. That's it. So I think we've brought the situation to the point where this is mass produced and available for $1. Well, I think anyone can afford 50 hryvnias. So all those people who tried to make money off this can't do it anymore. Thanks to the conscious individuals who spent their time and effort printing these every day and sending them out. And here's the result.
I'm amazed by the variety and by what people have come up with. It turns out loading a magazine takes some getting used. You have to train your finger to do it right. But everything's already been invented. People already made a little plastic gadget for it.
For example, these drones that shoot down enemy UAVs, what kind of warhead do they have? They use a plastic container like this, which has a convenient mount, and that's it. In other words, this plastic container is 3D printed. Everything that's needed is sent to the soldier. He stuffs shrapnel in here. He stuffs explosives in here. The threading here is made for an EDPR. That's a military electric detonator, EDPR. And that's it. So for the Solgerno, one Ukroboron Prom doesn't produce munitions for shooting down UAVs, for FPV drones. But the Druk Army printers are doing exactly that.
And what's this here?
This is simply a prosthetic cover.
Uh-huh.
Because just a plain prosthesis, what's inconvenient about it is it's basically just a tube. And especially with amputations above the knee, to make movements, you have to push your leg forward. The pant leg gets wrapped around this tube and gets caught. And basically, you can fall. This thing replicates the shape of the shin and attaches easily. And in this way, a person with an amputation can easily walk with a prosthesis in jeans or pants and not experience any problems. It takes a long time to print, but anyone can print it. And that is, I'm just trying to show that in our range of what we do, there is a very wide scope of what exists and what is needed, and that it directly affects the process at the front and helps those who can no longer be at the front. By the way, we have a hub, a so-called Heroes Hub. Essentially, it's for soldiers who have been injured and can no longer actively participate in combat operations. We give them printers, filament, and they continue to take part in the defense of Ukraine, just now in the role of those who produce these kinds of items for their comrades who are actively involved.
I'm shocked. I'm really shocked. Tell me, are you the first in the world, or is there any similar large-scale distributed production system based on modern 3D printing technologies?
To be honest, I haven't come across anything like this. But sometime in 2023, I saw a NATO document where they were dreaming about how it would be nice to have something like this. Because in reality, there are concepts of mobile 3D farms where there are several printers inside some kind of container. But that's not really relevant because printing takes a long time. So to arrive somewhere and set up in a combat zone only to have your container with a few printers, it's actually not effective.
Absolutely. The point is precisely a distributed network with an infinite number of cells. It's practically impossible for the enemy to hunt down every cell, like trying to cut out every single node in a web. It's unthinkable to even attempt that. It's unimaginable. Listen, if you can, could you please share, even just roughly, about how many people do you have? Is it 1,000, 100, or maybe even 10,000?
We don't hide this information. We don't keep it secret. It's right on the main page of our website. Anyone can see it. At the moment, we have about 3,200 to 3,300 active printers who send things out every month. Right now, I have the data in front of me. And over the past 30 days, 3,129 people have made some kind of shipment. Altogether, that's over 1 million different items. Both large items like this, as well as smaller ones, are all carefully counted, of course. But the total combined weight of all of these shipments together is actually 37,000 kilograms. 37 tons.
Tons per month?
That works out to about 10 kilograms per person or even less. So basically, it seems like a lot. But on the other hand, actually, it's not that much because there are even more requests. Ideally, we need to triple the number of people who are printing. And that's just to meet the current demand coming from the front. And in fact, these requests are increasing because more and more units are switching to the solutions we offer. Since we provide comprehensive solutions, it's not just, here's a piece of plastic, do something with it. We offer both these pieces of plastic and the tactics for their direct application. And it's not always just related to UAV. There are also solutions for sappers, infantry, and so on. That's why we need more people. If we're going to win it, I intend to win. I'm doing all of this only because I want to bring that moment closer. If we're going to win, we need to get actively involved. Not everyone has made that mental switch to a wartime footing yet. Most people, I'll be honest, I used to think this way to think, well, yes, our public healthcare system is, not that great, right? Something's not really working. And there are other systems that are also state-run. But well, the army should be something completely different. After all, it's the army. But it turned out that in reality, there's no difference at all. Whether it's healthcare or the army, it's the same from the perspective of how the state manages these processes. So it's important to understand that without the involvement of everyone for whom Ukraine matters, we won't succeed. Yes, the state fulfills certain functions. It supplies shells for the artillerymen, explosives for the sappers. That's all well and good, of course, but without the active participation of every person, there's no way we can win. It's impossible. That's why a printer in every a printer in every home isn't just a nice phrase. It's a necessary condition for our victory. The more printers there are, the more stable the front line is, the slower it moves. Yes, of course, they have more forces there and they still advance. But at what cost? So this cost should be as high as possible. And by making things like this for drones, we are maximizing.
What is this?
This is a plastic casing, which the military will most likely turn into a fragmentation explosive munition. Everything is 3D printed.
Listen, and the little green part you see, green tip, what exactly is that? Do you know?
That's the famous Edelweiss. It's a system that allows the detonator is screwed in here underneath it. And when it falls down, even if it's tumbling, yes, this is what's called a percussion cap.
Uh-huh.
A frontal initiator. We have a separate department that deals with these things. So this is the result of a huge number of iterations with feedback from the military in order to achieve the most effective, reliable system that won't trigger at the wrong time.
And so it doesn't slip. That's why it's rough like that.
Yes.
That is to transfer force as efficiently as possible and avoid any misalignment. That's why it has this particular shape. All right, we are about to reveal all the military secrets. So let's just move on to. Well, I put it much more cautiously and carefully. The hostilities will end. And let's say you have 3,000 people after our broadcast. You'll have 13,000 people. So they've bought 13,000 printers. What are they supposed to do with all that afterward? Keep them to show their grandchildren? Or do you envision some kind of civilian development for this?
Well, first of all, to be honest, Druk Army was created to achieve victory. After that, of course, we'll all go to Crimea. And having a 3D printer is actually pretty useful around the house. It's a rather convenient household device that lets you make just about anything. For example, I have a tic-tac cannon. So I don't really take Tic Tacs out of the box anymore. I just shoot them straight into my mouth. It's a really handy thing, I have to say. And you can make a huge variety of convenient little gadgets like that. So 3D printing really changes the way you perceive the things around you. Because before you had to go to the store and find what you needed there. But now you either download a ready-made model and print it yourself, or you design it. It's actually not that difficult. But seriously, nothing stops you from using our database of developments. First of all, for educational purposes. A 3D printer is a very good tool. There are so-called STEM lessons, for children. From 3D printing to, so to speak, robotics and programming is just one step. So the educational function is definitely there. And in general, as it was initially, first it was COVID, now it's the war. I'm sure that our nation will face.
They'll come up with something.
I think that life will throw more at use in essence. This is a kind of a service-oriented internal Ukrainian organization. We encounter some problem and as a society, we solve it. Not like the government, which will go and make some state procurement, where someone will definitely scheme something off the top in 3 days. In other words, it's inefficient. But on the contrary, it's exactly the opposite. With maximum efficiency and without any unnecessary bureaucratic red tape or ineffective decision.
If this were a philosophical discussion, I would say before our eyes, libertarian ideas of decentralization and a complete rejection of state intervention in production are coming true due to the new technologies of the 21st century. The founding fathers of the United States and others could never have imagined this would become possible, to completely disregard the state, and everyone simply does what is needed, what the consumer needs and wants.
Well, it's just that in certain situations, you sometimes hear people exclaiming on social media, why didn't the government do this? Well, it didn't, so you do it. Everything has already been created for this. The entry barrier has been lowered as much as possible, and all the mechanisms have been simplified to the maximum. Where to get a printer, where to get plastic, and so on. All of this already exists and is accessible. We have everyone printing from kids aged 10 to 14 to quite elderly people over 75 without any problems. In other words, this is available to a very wide range of people. And I believe that not taking part in this is a kind of masochism or, something close to suicidal tendencies.
Absolutely, Evgeny. I think we've said everything that needed to be said. Anything more would only make things worse. All that's left is to tell the audience what you will provide us with in the description of this video.
In the description of this video, I will provide 2 links. One link is for those who want to get involved directly and actively participate. This is the Army Printer website, although you can simply type Druk Army into Google. And by the way, besides setting up a printer and printing, spreading information, which is what we're doing right now, is another important role. We have a recruiting section there. There, a person has their own link that they can share if they don't have the financial means or any other resources. But if they have time, they can attract people, and the system will track how many kilograms were printed by those you invited. This way, you can calculate your personal contribution to victory. And the second link is for those who just want to help financially. We are constantly buying plastic, we buy springs, we buy nails. So for all these kinds of things, again, yes, so there are a lot of various such supplies. Please, you can also join in this way. And the whole process is completely transparent. You can view an open statement with all the transactions on our accounts. From the very beginning, the process was basically set up to be transparent against the backdrop of all the corruption scandals with eggs and everything else, considering the reputations involved. So the process is transparent and everyone can be absolutely sure that their $10, so to speak, will be turned into plastic. And we calculated that basically 5 kilograms of plastic is either guaranteed, how should I put it? Either one eliminated occupier or one Ukrainian soldier definitely saved. Because the mockups do their job, and we still need a lot more of them.
And it's just 5 kilograms. All that's left is to make more plastic eggs, 17 each. 17.
You'll laugh. But actually, in partnership with OTP Bank, we're making plastic eggs with little dragons printed inside. And so for those who donate for the plastic, they give these eggs as gifts. Not for 17 hryvnias, of course, but still eggs.
I see. Wonderful, Evgeny. 3, I'm impressed. Honestly, I have to say I'm impressed by the structure you've created, really, in terms of contribution to efficiency, contribution to results. This is nothing like Elon Musk, whose rockets keep crashing one after another, and yet everyone thinks he's a great genius. But this is truly impressive. This is a real deal. So, dear audience, I think everything is clear to everyone. The video description will contain, the information. You can join in any way that's convenient for you, starting from the simplest, transferring some amount of your own money, or even better, setting up one of these devices on your balcony and having fun with it later, but for now, helping out in a practical way. Evgeny, thank you so much for coming to see us and, of course, for what you have done.
Yes.